The simulation was failing. High-tech training systems were malfunctioning. Live ammunition was mixing with blanks, and young Marines were about to die in what should have been a safe exercise. "We're losing control," shouted Range Officer Lieutenant Williams into his radio, panic filling his voice. At that moment, an aged but strong voice echoed from the observation deck. "No, son, you just forgot how to fight," said Gunnery Sergeant Michael Garcia with a calm but authoritative tone. Welcome to the Vietnam Stories. Before we tell this powerful story, let us know in the comments which city you're watching from today, and if you believe stories like this need to be told, hit that subscribe button to help keep these stories alive. Gunnery Sergeant Michael "Iron Mike" Garcia, 69 years old, sat in the observation booth at Quantico. His gray hair was cut military short, his weathered hands bearing the marks of countless battles. He wore a faded green instructor's uniform with a worn patch on his left chest. The patch was so weathered that details were hard to make out, but up close you could see a golden eagle figure on a red background. This was the combat patch of the 1st Marine Division from the Vietnam War. Early that morning, the young Marines had noticed Garcia. Lance Corporal Jake Stevens, 22 years old, a tough kid from Texas, had whispered quietly to his friends. "Who's that old guy? He's walking around like he owns the place," Stevens said, pointing at Garcia. Private Tommy Chen, 20 years old, a tech-savvy kid from California, shrugged. "Don't know. Probably some retiree. These old folks are always chasing nostalgia," Chen said with a mocking tone. Sergeant Lisa Martinez, 25 years old, a tough Puerto Rican woman soldier, smirked. "I bet that guy never saw real combat in his life, probably did office work," Martinez said confidently. Private David Rodriguez, the youngest in the group at just 19, asked curiously. "But why is he hanging around the training area?" Rodriguez asked. "Who knows, maybe he misses the old days," Stevens said, shrugging. They were wrong. Michael Garcia had served in Vietnam from 1968-1970, fighting in the Battle of Hue City, the Tet Offensive, and countless other operations. But he hadn't just fought. He had also trained young Marines. He had taught them how to survive, how to fight, and most importantly, how to protect each other. During that period, he was famous in the 1st Marine Division for over 200 confirmed enemy kills and earned the nickname Iron Mike for never retreating under any circumstances. Garcia's mind was filled with vivid memories from Vietnam. The year 1969, Operation Hamburger Hill. As a young sergeant, he commanded a 12-man squad. Back then, too, there were such young, overconfident soldiers, but war had taught them the truth quickly. At 2 p.m., the exercise began. They were using the modern Miles system, laser-based simulation equipment. In theory, it should have been completely safe. Sensors attached to each soldier's weapon would detect laser beams and simulate hits. But something was going wrong. Captain David Morrison was directing the exercise, a Harvard ROTC graduate, 31 years old, a bright officer with 2 years of active duty experience. He came from a military family tradition. His father had served in Iraq. His grandfather was a Korean War veteran. But Morrison had never seen real combat. "Blue team advance from the left, red team from the right. You will use simulation ammunition. Don't forget safety protocols," Morrison ordered into his radio microphone. "Understood, Commander," said team leader Sergeant Williams from the blue team. "Roger that, sir," said Sergeant Thompson from the red team. Garcia watched from the observation deck. Something was missing in the young Marines' movements. They were moving too fast, not checking their surroundings enough. They weren't using cover properly. But most importantly, their instincts to protect each other hadn't developed. In Vietnam, those who moved like this would die within the first hour. When the exercise began, the first 10 minutes went normally. The blue team advanced from the left as planned, the red team from the right. The Miles system's laser beams crossed in the air. Hit simulations were being recorded by the system. "Blue 3 hit," called out a system operator. "Red 7 eliminated," added another operator. Morrison was pleased. Everything was going according to plan. Maybe this exercise would be a good mark in his promotion file. Then the system malfunctioned. "Sir, the Miles system isn't responding," shouted Technician Williams, raising his head from the control panel. "What do you mean not responding?" Morrison asked with an anxious tone. "Laser systems aren't working, and worse, the ammunition detectors are mixed up. Some weapons might be loaded with live ammunition," Williams said, sweating. Morrison's heart began to race. This was his first major exercise. Any accident would mean the end of his career. He couldn't disappoint the trust Colonel Richardson had placed in him. "All units, stop immediately. Cease fire order, I repeat, cease fire," Morrison ordered into the radio, his voice trembling. But it was too late. The field was noisy, radios weren't working clearly, and the young Marines were under the influence of adrenaline. The excitement of the war game had consumed them. When the first real gunshot rang out, Garcia jumped to his feet. That sound wasn't simulation. It was the real sound of an M16, and Garcia had heard it thousands of times. "Live round, someone's using real ammunition," shouted Technician Williams, panicking as he moved away from the control panel. "Damn it!" Morrison said, putting his hands to his head. Panic began. The young Marines didn't know what to do. Some hit the ground, others started running. Coordination completely broke down. The procedures they had learned in training were forgotten in the face of real panic. "Private Jackson is hit, leg wound, we need medical assistance," called Lance Corporal Stevens from the field. "Martinez is hit too, bleeding from the shoulder," shouted another soldier. Morrison froze. He was commanding a real crisis for the first time and didn't know what to do. The theoretical knowledge he had learned at the academy was inadequate in the face of reality. Garcia couldn't wait any longer. He left the observation deck and ran toward the field. Despite being 69 years old, his mobility was surprising. "Hey, old man, what are you doing? This is an active combat zone. Fall back," Morrison shouted when he saw Garcia. Garcia didn't even look at him. He went straight to Jackson, quickly assessed his condition. The leg wound wasn't serious. The femoral artery was intact, but the bleeding needed to be stopped. "First aid kit now," Garcia ordered, automatically switching to command mode. "Who are you?" asked wounded Jackson in pain. "I'm the man saving your life. Now be quiet and don't move. The wound is superficial, but there's infection risk," Garcia said, examining the wound. Garcia pulled bandages from the kit, expertly dressing the wound. He had done this hundreds of times in Vietnam. At that moment, another gunshot was heard, this time closer. "Private Martinez is also hit. Shoulder wound, heavy bleeding," shouted Sergeant Thompson. "Base command, we need emergency assistance. Live fire accident, 2 wounded," Morrison said into the radio, panic in his voice. 10 minutes out," came the reply. Garcia stood up. 10 minutes was too long. At this rate, more people could be injured. Panic was spreading, discipline was breaking down. "Morrison!" Garcia called with an authoritative voice. "What?" Morrison said, turning around in stress and fear. "Pull your men back, right now. Call them to Central Rally Point," Garcia said with a decisive tone. "You can't give me orders. I'm the commander here. You don't even have rank," Morrison said angrily. "And I'm the only person here who's seen real combat. I know how to control this situation, do you?" Garcia said calmly but firmly. Morrison hesitated. The composure in Garcia's eyes, the confidence in his voice had affected him. This man was different. "What can I do?" Morrison asked, setting aside his pride. "First, gather all personnel at Central Point, then get weapons to safe position. And most importantly, prevent them from panicking. Show leadership," Garcia said, giving instructions. Garcia advanced toward the field. When the young Marines saw him, they were surprised. An elderly civilian was walking toward the firing line. "Listen to me. I am Gunnery Sergeant Garcia. I am taking control of this exercise now," Garcia shouted, his voice filling the entire field. "Who are you? You're not even an instructor. What's your rank?" shouted Lance Corporal Stevens angrily. Garcia approached Stevens, his eyes cold and determined. Son, when I was your age, I fought 200 North Vietnamese in Hue City. I held position for 72 hours at Hamburger Hill. Nobody here is more experienced than I am right now, Garcia said, no doubt in his voice. Stevens backed away. Garcia's authority, his confidence from war was unquestionable. Everyone get your weapons to safe position. Check your ammunition. If anyone is carrying live ammo, report immediately, Garcia ordered using his command voice. Listen to Sergeant Garcia, Morrison added, grasping the situation. The Marines followed his order. Garcia went to the wounded, checking their conditions. Jackson, how's your leg? Garcia asked, checking the bandage. Getting better, Sergeant, but it still hurts, Jackson said. You'll endure it. You're a soldier, don't forget. Martinez, your shoulder? Garcia said, turning to the other wounded man. I can move it. Seems like just a scratch, Martinez said. Garcia nodded with satisfaction. Neither wounded was serious. He had seen much worse in Vietnam. Morrison, Garcia called. Morrison came running. Yes, Sergeant? Morrison asked. When will the ambulance arrive? Garcia asked. 5 minutes, Morrison said. Good. We'll keep the situation stabilized until then, Garcia said, explaining his plan. Garcia gathered the young Marines around him. This was teaching time. Friends, you learned an important lesson today. Technology isn't always reliable, but teamwork and discipline always work, Garcia said, switching to teacher mode. Sergeant, did you really fight in Vietnam? Chen said curiously. Yes, son. I did 2 tours from 1968 to 1970, and I can tell you this, real war is nothing like any simulation, Garcia said. What's the difference? Stevens asked, this time respectfully. In real war, you don't have the luxury of making mistakes. If you make one mistake, either you die or your buddy dies. That's why you must always be prepared, always be careful, and most importantly, never leave each other behind, Garcia said, sharing from his experiences. How many people did you kill? Rodriguez asked hesitantly. Garcia paused. He never liked this question. Many, but the number doesn't matter. What matters is how many of your friends' lives you saved, Garcia said. The ambulance arrived, the wounded were taken. The doctor said they approved of Garcia's first aid. Morrison approached Garcia. Garcia, I don't know how to thank you. If you hadn't intervened, it could have been much worse, Morrison said sincerely. Captain, you're a good officer. You just lack experience, but you learned today. Next time you'll be more prepared, Garcia said, looking at Morrison. Would you teach me? Real leadership, field command? Morrison asked humbly. Of course, but first you must understand something. Leadership isn't just giving orders. It's earning your men's trust, protecting them, and walking in front of them when necessary, Garcia said. A week later, an official ceremony was held at Quantico. A ceremony to present Garcia with an honorary instructor badge. All base personnel attended. Base Commander Colonel Richardson said in his speech, "This week we all learned a valuable lesson. Experience comes with age, but wisdom can only be learned from the right mentors. Sergeant Garcia reminded us that real leadership comes not from rank, but from character," Richardson said. When Garcia spoke, the entire base listened quietly. Young Marines, I want to tell you something. War isn't just weapons and technology. It's character, it's courage, and most importantly, it's loyalty to each other, Garcia said with his experienced voice. He paused. I learned in Vietnam that the only way to survive is to be together. Your strongest weapon is trust in your buddy, Garcia said. Sergeant Garcia, do you have any request from us? Stevens asked, raising his hand. 1. When you see the next old veteran, listen to him because our stories might save your life, Garcia said, smiling. A new plaque was hung on the base wall. Garcia rule, respect experience, work as a team, never leave your buddy behind. That night, Morrison called his family. Today I worked with a real leader and almost missed him. I learned to show more respect to the elderly and experience, Morrison told his wife. This story became legend at Quantico. Every young Marine learns the story of Michael Iron Mike Garcia and understands. Real leaders don't always carry rank, but they're always ready. 3 months later, Garcia officially became Quantico's chief tactical instructor. He taught young Marines his Vietnam experiences, real combat tactics, and most importantly, unit spirit. Because he knew that technology changes, weapons evolve, but the heart of war is always the same: courage, loyalty, and brotherhood. Garcia's class became the most popular course on base. In his class called Real Combat Experiences, he shared his memories from Vietnam, conducted tactical analysis, and most importantly, taught young people the true meaning of leadership. Now I ask you, have you ever met someone who worked quietly but emerged when needed like this? Maybe you too encountered a gunnery Sergeant Garcia but didn't realize it. Share their stories in the comments. Because at the Vietnam Stories, we believe that the greatest leadership is sometimes hidden in the most weathered uniforms. If this story moved you, subscribe, share, and remember, heroes are real. They just wait for the moment to lead when others can't. We'll see you in the next story. Until then, if you see an old Marine with faded patches, look at him with respect. Maybe he's the Iron Mike who could save your unit.